Even the most well-planned worksheets will require you to add a column here, remove a row there, or add a cell or two to make room for something you didn't have in mind when the worksheet was created. Luckily, these additions and deletions are easy to do, using buttons found right on the Home tab or from a quick pop-up menu when you right-click the area that needs a little restructuring. First, let's look at adding cells, rows, and columns. To add a cell, click on the cell that should end up below the cell you're adding, and click the Insert button on the ribbon. Here, I want to put a cell between the last item in the Quantity on Hand column and the total number of items in inventory. Excel automatically moves the cell with the formula in it down, inserting a new cell above it in cell F29. Note that Excel is not actually adding a new cell to the worksheet. The total number of cells in the sheet has not increased. It's simply shifting the cell you selected down so that an empty cell now precedes it. It's kind of like moving the cell's contents, but without having to drag it manually or deal with surrounding content that's in the way. Now, sometimes this doesn't work exactly as you'd hoped. If I select the empty cell and the cell that contains the formula and click the Insert button, Excel guesses, perhaps not correctly, that I wanted to add cells to the left of the selection. So it's essentially moved my formula over to the right. Excel's guesses are made based on your selected cell or cells and the surrounding content. If that's not what I wanted to do, and it wasn't, I can select the empty cells and click the Delete button right next to the Insert button on the Home tab. And the formula is back in cell F30, where the first insertion placed it. To have more control where the inserted cell or cells appear, you need to click the bottom half of the Insert button, which displays a dialog box where you can choose where the inserted cell or cells end up. Here, I'll select the same two cells and then click the bottom half of the Insert button and choose Insert Cells. This gives me a dialog box where I can choose to shift cells right or shift cells down. We'll look at inserting entire rows and columns in a minute. I'll choose Shift Cells Down, and the two cells are inserted above the selected cells, depositing my formula in cell F32. So now let's look at rows. To add a row, select the row, the entire row, by clicking the row number. It should be moved down to make room for a new one. Then click the Insert button, again on the Home tab. You can also right-click the row and choose Insert from the pop-up menu. If you want to insert more than one row, select the number of rows you want to insert and then click the Insert button, or again, right-click to get the pop-up menu. I can select, for example, the 3 rows from the top of the inventory list and then click the Insert button. Now I have 3 empty rows above the first item in the inventory list. Deletion is equally simple. Select the rows you want to get rid of and click the Delete button. So I can get rid of the 3 rows I just created, plus the 2 I created in my demonstration a moment ago. Remember, to select non-contiguous rows, columns, or cells, hold down the Control key as you make the selections. Bear in mind, the Delete button on the Home tab will delete the rows, columns, or cells along with any data in them without any pause to ask if that's what you mean to do, so be careful. Moving on to columns, adding and deleting columns is equally simple. Select the column that should be on the right of the new column and click the Insert button. Here, I'll add a column to become the vendor column in the inventory list, and it will become column E, moving the unit price column and all the columns after it over one. If I change my mind, select that new column and click the Delete button on the Home tab. Note that the delete button on the keyboard will only remove the content from the selection, not remove the selection itself, so that's not an equivalent method. Now, as we saw earlier, clicking the bottom half of the Insert button displays a dialog box. Let's look at how that works. When we have a cell or cells, not a whole row or column, selected, the Insert Cells command has an ellipsis after it in the Insert button menu. And with a cell or cells selected, the Delete buttons menu also includes a command with an ellipsis, Delete Cells. Each command opens a dialog box asking how the insertion or deletion should affect the selected cells. After you choose your preference, the action takes place according to your choice. Now let's wrap up with a tip. There's one thing that the Insert button does that takes users by surprise. If you've made a selection and copied it to the clipboard, using the Copy button on the Home tab or by pressing Ctrl-C, using the Insert button, not its menu, the main button, will paste that content. How do you avoid this? If you're making room for copied content, and that's why you're using the Insert button, insert the requisite space before you copy the content that will go into the newly opened up cells, columns, or rows. This will eliminate surprises and allow you to control what, where, and when things happen in your worksheets.